So as I was staying up very late last night trying to get together an even better presentation than the one I'm showing you today, I'm like, there's no way. It's all going to fall apart. It's going to be a big disaster. So here I am, and hopefully it won't be a giant disaster. My name is Richard Billington McGuire. I'm a senior architect at Blackstone Technology Group. We're a software consultancy in San Francisco with a lot of people here in the Washington D.C. area. We do 70% government, 30% commercial. A lot of work in cloud computing, mobile computing, web content management, Drupal in the government space, things like that. A lot of enterprise integration. I can be reached at Obscure Richard on Twitter. And today I'm going to go over three things. That's much better. Today I'm going to go over three things. I'm going to talk about the alternatives in infrastructure as a service and platform as a service offerings that I'm most familiar with, and make some recommendations. I'm going to talk about web service APIs and what you might want to do when you're considering how to communicate between your mobile device or your website and your backend on the cloud. And then I'm going to hopefully launch my Facebook application, which I've been working on as a secret project for over a year, on and off, called Like-Minded. And I'll demonstrate some things about the code and some of the choices I made in designing the front end and back end of this, and talk about kind of where I'm going with it. And I'd love to get feedback on that. So without further ado, okay. Wow, it's all messed up. Let's see. Okay. We'll start with the cloud backends. So you heard our previous presenter talk a lot about Amazon Web Services and Heroku. Really, the sorts of web services that you might base your cloud backend on fall into two basic bins. There's infrastructure as a service, where generally you provision virtual machines, you provision storage in the cloud using fairly low-level APIs. It's closer to the bare metal. And then there's platform as a service. Platform as a service, you write your application using some application framework, and the underlying cloud platform will take care of doing a lot of the scaling issues that you would otherwise have to do. Now, which is the right way to do it? There is no real right way to do it. And many applications make use of both sets of services, picking and choosing, as we saw with the App47 demo. Now, Amazon has really been in the lead, and the ugly truth is a lot of the platform as a service offerings like Heroku use the infrastructure as a service services that Amazon uses. That outage they had was because one of their low-level infrastructure as a service offerings, the Elastic Block Store, which is sort of like their virtual hard drive or persistent hard drive in the cloud, had trouble in one of their regions. And when this happened, Heroku went down, Netflix went down, all sorts of bad things happened. People who were using other of their services were not affected. So SQS, no problem. S3, their image storage service, no problem. But if you relied on EBS, and a lot of people do because it's convenient, it's a lot more like the, let's run an application on a server that has a persistent hard drive, and it's going to come back up the next time the server launches. People are used to that, so they like to build applications using this as a building block. Amazon's biggest competitor is probably Rackspace, and Rackspace has some other interesting characteristics. Now, they've been working with the former NASA Nebula team on some more open cloud APIs. There's something called OpenStack, which Rackspace is providing, in addition to some EC2 compatible, some Amazon Web Service compatible APIs, and their own APIs. So there's some very interesting work going on here, and some of the open source cloud solutions end up being compatible with one or both through some compatibility layers. I'll show some more about that in a minute. Now, when it turns out that managing this complexity is a challenge for a lot of organizations, especially as these cloud infrastructure as a service offerings come out. Sometimes they're not fully baked as far as monitoring goes, or as far as auto scaling goes. This is less and less the case. A lot of people used RightScale, this cloud management platform, to manage their Amazon and Rackspace instances, with load balancing and automatic provisioning. And I think it's less necessary than it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, if you wanted to launch something on the cloud with Amazon as your backend and you wanted to auto scale, it just wasn't baked into the platform. But now they have auto scaling built in many cases. They have monitoring built in. It's a lot more usable. So these guys are going to expand on the high end, and the infrastructure as a provider folks are going to eat their lunch on the bottom end and make them less necessary for small to mid-size installations. There are also efforts out there like Delta Cloud from Red Hat, which aims to be a cloud-independent system for doing infrastructure as a service computing, but having some independence. So the problem of, what do we do? Amazon's EC2 service with EBS volumes is toast. Can we spin up our stuff on another cloud? Can we use Rackspace? Well, not unless you've tested your backend APIs, that they'll actually work with a different provider. So if you're going to do that, it might be worthwhile to investigate something like this, where you could go to the EC2 cloud or the Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization Cloud or some third-party provider. So now they've got a very interesting matrix here of what they support, for example. There's a lot of players in here, and this is only going to grow before it shrinks. You're like, well, that's a lot of hassle. Do I really want to be spinning up my own VMs and managing them individually? That sounds a lot like the way you might have done it 5 or 10 years ago. Get colo or leased services. And you don't have to do that. In fact, if you want to start out, it might be a better idea to start by using a platform as a service offering. And there are a lot of good offerings here. In fact, one of them is even part of AWS, the AWS Elastic Beanstalk. They have some offerings that edge into the platform as a service. Here, if you're a Java developer, this is great. All I have to do is submit a WAR through some web service call, and my application will spin up and automatically scale. I love it. So if that's your cup of tea, then you might want to look into this. You could also use Google App Engine, and this is an interesting offering. It lets you write applications in Python or Java or Go, and because it supports Java, you can also write applications on many languages that support Java as a virtual machine. And I've heard of people writing Ruby applications that run on this, or writing Scala or Groovy. There's a lot of JVM-related tools, and people are porting a lot of the stuff so it'll run on Google App Engine. You could also write applications in Google's new experimental language, Go, which has some interesting characteristics and has the potential to be higher performing than a lot of the other platform as a service offerings. Now, I chose to build the Facebook app that I'm going to launch here shortly on Google App Engine. Now, you could use Heroku. Heroku is cool stuff. I love the Git workflow. I haven't used Heroku personally, but I've kind of seen a lot of people around me using Heroku. Some of the customers, the consulting firms, and some of the companies where people I know are working or using this, and they love it. This lets you do Ruby, Node.js, Clojure, Java, Python, and Scala. So there's a wide variety of languages here, and they take care of scaling a lot of the issues. So this really bears looking into. And there's actually one more thing that has tilted me more towards wanting to look into Heroku more deeply that I'll show you as I'm getting ready to launch this thing. And there's some kind of dark horse entrance in here, like the Salesforce has a cloud API called force.com, where you can deploy the platform as a service offerings, and it looks like they're kind of edging into the infrastructure as a service arena in some instances also. And in some of these things, the assumptions that you might make about, that company's closed and they're never going to open anything up, turn out to be wrong. VMware has open sourced some interesting cloud-related stuff that they've been working on lately. There's so much good work happening in these areas. There's no one right choice. There's just trade-offs. So, no, if you're trying to develop a cloud-backed mobile application, my advice would be pick a language you're familiar with or that you want to become familiar with, a set of environments that you won't have a monstrous ramp with. Maybe it's time to take a chance on Ruby. Maybe it's time to use one of the new JVM technologies. But you do need to consider if you want to scale it, what the developer community is going to be like. How hard is it going to be to recruit people to write Scala for you?